Hello Channel NITT viewers, I'm DS Psychologist and welcome to another episode on Channel NITT. So the ENTJ uses TE as their dominant function. This means that they really prefer to think than to use emotions. This does not mean that the ENTJ does not have emotions, however they tend to brush emotions aside and be objective and rational when it comes to solving problems. So given that the ENTJ tends to dismiss emotions, is it true that the ENTJ has no sense of compassion? This is the topic of today's episode. So before we explore any further, I am going to distinguish between two terms that are easily confused but have something to do with our topic, and that would be empathy and sympathy. Empathy is the ability to understand another person's feelings as if we were experiencing it ourselves. So when we are empathetic, we are able to put ourselves into the other person's shoes.
These boots are made for walking. That's just what they'll do.
Now this is quite different from sympathy. What is sympathy? Sympathy, on the other hand, is the ability to take part in other people's feelings, mostly by feeling sorrowful over other people's misfortune. So in other words, sympathy is closely related to compassion. So I mentioned that the topic for this episode is the ENTJ compassionate? So in order for us to answer this question, we may have to split the question into two parts. Is the ENTJ empathetic, and can the ENTJ sympathize? So prior to recording this episode, I have surveyed some of my friends. I asked them this question. If a person were to fail a test or examination, how many percent of the fault lies in the person himself or herself? I did not have a very large sample size for this. I asked 6 different people, and interestingly, the percentages that I received as replies lie between 50% to 70%. This means that many people believe that the person failing has himself to blame, but it's only 50 to 70%. So this is very different from an ENTJ's perspective. So as an ENTJ, my say is that if a person fails an exam or a test, then the fault is 100% that of the person himself. The ENTJ is an individual that believes that all challenges can be overcome. Coupled with a very strong thinking orientation, the ENTJ has a very strong internal attribution. What this means is that the ENTJ tends to attribute everything internally. If I did not do well for a test, if I become late for class, all the fault is mine. So as you can see, the ENTJ can be very harsh on themselves. It is also true that the INTJ, who also has the same cognitive functions, can be very harsh on themselves as well. Many of my viewers know that I teach psychology, and as a lecturer, I have witnessed a lot of failures in examinations. I've also observed that some people, they absent themselves from an examination because they are sick. From an ENTJ's point of view, unless I am handicapped, I will, no matter how sick I am, attend an examination. So I can be having a diarrhea, a cold, a flu, or a splitting headache, I will still attend an examination and do well in it. So an ENTJ is very likely to blame himself or herself for failure, instead of blaming circumstances such as I was sick. Because this, to the ENTJ, is no excuse. Because this thinking orientation is so strong in the ENTJ, many people will find us very inhuman. We are very harsh on ourselves, and sometimes we project this harshness onto other people, expecting them to be the same. So take note, there is no double standard. We are not harsh on others, but lenient on ourselves. We are harsh on ourselves as well, and even harsher on ourselves than on others. So in other words, we are not sympathetic. So in terms of sympathy, we are almost zero. We don't sympathize with people easily. In fact, when people feel sad, I do not know how to console them at all, because I think it's unnecessary. Sad life. So it is very unlikely that I will blame my family background, I will blame my parents for the state that I'm in, because I can always rise to the occasion.
So come on, rise to the occasion.
So a person with high thinking orientation is likely to be very strong and resilient in this regard. Of course, the bad side of it is that we really lack compassion.
Can you imagine no love?
So to answer the question, is the ENTJ not a compassionate person? Yes, the ENTJ is not exactly compassionate. This is because of the internal attribution. They believe that they can change everything. So when they look at the plight of others, they usually cannot sympathize. So you got yourself into this deep shit. You believe a scammer. It's all your fault. You were naive. You were stupid. So we tend to think this way. So in this regard, no compassion. However, if we were the one who fell prey to a scammer, unfortunately, let's say, then we take full responsibility in it. We won't wallow and say that we were cheated of our money. We just accept that we were cheated. And that's it. We move on. We might be very grudgy, but we move on. Because we ourselves move on very quickly, we find it very hard to sympathize with somebody who cries father, cry mother, wallow in sorrow. Wait! Before you condemn the ENTJ completely, there is a saving grace. Remember, we were talking about empathy, right? The ENTJ can empathize. Now why? Because the ENTJ uses TE as their dominant function, and TE is the ability to think from other people's perspective. So while we cannot feel, we can think. You had a family member that has just passed on and you couldn't attend class or you couldn't attend a function. We personally will still attend the work, but we can understand that you can't. So we won't push that hard because this is a special circumstance. It is valid. So there might be very special circumstances such as your dog got into an accident and needs an immediate surgery and needs your immediate attention. We can totally understand it. We cannot feel what you feel, but we understand that you need to take this time off. So these are just a few examples, but the ENTJ can really be very understanding. Although we are not empathetic as in like totally can feel what you feel, but we can understand your situation and we will give you credit for it. One thing to note though, if the ENTJ is going through very hard times, they tend to swallow it and face it themselves. So this makes them very different from many other MBTI types, especially the F orientation types. So back to our original question, is the ENTJ compassionate? No, but they can be empathetic. There you have it. I hope you have learned something about the ENTJ in this episode. If you have not subscribed, do consider subscribing so that we can bring you more ENTJ, MBTI and psychology. Okay, I'm going to sign off now and I'll see you in my next episode. Goodbye!